Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Political ideology in discourse analysis. Interactive assistant political ideology refers to the set of beliefs, values, and ideas that shape how individuals and groups understand and engage with politics, governance, and social order. In discourse analysis, political ideology is examined through the language used in political speeches, media, policy documents, and everyday conversations to understand how ideologies are constructed, maintained, and challenged. Discourse analysis uncovers how language reflects ideological positions, frames political issues, and influences public opinion and behavior. By analyzing the linguistic choices, rhetorical strategies, and underlying assumptions in political discourse, discourse analysis reveals how ideologies shape our understanding of concepts like democracy, freedom, equality, justice, and governance. Political ideologies often manifest through specific narratives, metaphors, and framings, reflecting deeper power dynamics and social structures. Key features of political ideology in discourse analysis. 1. Framing of political issues. Framing refers to the way political issues are presented to the public. Political ideologies shape how problems and solutions are framed in discourse, influencing what is considered important, who is responsible, and what should be done. Example: in the debate over healthcare, conservatives might frame the issue as protecting individual freedom from government overreach, emphasizing personal responsibility, while progressives might frame it as a human right that should be accessible to all, focusing on collective well-being. Discourse analysis would explore how these contrasting framings reflect deeper ideological divides over the role of government and individual rights. 2. Use of rhetorical strategies. Political ideologies are often communicated through rhetorical strategies that persuade audiences, invoke emotions, or establish credibility. Discourse analysis examines how these strategies are used to align people with certain ideological positions and influence public attitudes. Example: in a campaign speech, a politician might say, "We must return power to the people," using populist rhetoric that appeals to ordinary citizens and criticizes elites. Discourse analysis would investigate how this rhetoric reflects anti-establishment ideologies and fosters a sense of disempowerment among the public. 3. Ideological metaphors. Metaphors play a key role in political discourse, helping to simplify complex political concepts and aligning them with specific ideological perspectives. Discourse analysis explores how metaphors convey ideological meaning and shape how people understand political issues. Example: in conservative economic discourse, the metaphor of the government as a household is often used to justify budget cuts, framing the state as needing to live within its means, similar to a family. Discourse analysis would explore how this metaphor supports ideologies of fiscal conservatism and limits the discussion of government spending on social programs. 4. Construction of social identities. Political ideologies often construct and reinforce social identities through language. Discourse analysis looks at how political groups, citizens, and opponents are defined in ideological terms, shaping how people identify themselves and others in the political landscape. Example: in nationalist discourse, terms like true patriots are used to construct a division between those who are seen as loyal to the nation and those who are not. Discourse analysis would examine how this language reinforces exclusionary ideologies, defining who belongs to the nation based on ideological or ethnic criteria. 5. Legitimizing authority and power. Political ideologies often work to legitimize authority and power through discourse. Discourse analysis investigates how language is used to justify the status quo, promote specific policies, or challenge existing power structures. Example: a government might use language like, "For the sake of national security, these measures are necessary," to justify surveillance or restrictive laws. Discourse analysis would explore how this language legitimizes the expansion of state power by appealing to ideologies of security and order, potentially at the expense of civil liberties. 6. Polarization and ideological conflict. Political ideologies often contribute to polarization, where language is used to create sharp divisions between opposing views. Discourse analysis examines how language intensifies ideological conflicts and how these divisions shape political debates. Example: in political discourse around immigration, one side might use terms like protecting our borders from invasion, while the other speaks of humanitarian responsibility to refugees. Discourse analysis would investigate how these opposing framings reflect deeper ideological conflicts about national sovereignty, security, and human rights. 7. Moral and ethical dimensions of ideology. Political ideologies often involve moral and ethical claims about what is right, just, or fair. Discourse analysis explores how political actors use language to frame their policies or beliefs as ethically superior, shaping public attitudes and behavior. Example: in debates about taxation, progressive politicians might argue, the wealthy must pay their fair share, framing taxation as a moral obligation to support the common good. Discourse analysis would examine how this moral framing aligns with ideologies of social justice and fairness, contrasting with opposing views that emphasize individual economic freedom. Methods for analyzing political ideology in discourse. 1. Critical discourse analysis, CDA. Critical discourse analysis, CDA, examines how political ideologies are embedded in language and how discourse reflects and reinforces power relations. CDA focuses on how dominant ideologies shape public discourse and how marginalized voices are included or excluded. Example: a CDA of media coverage during an election might reveal how language like protecting traditional values reflects conservative ideologies and reinforces certain cultural norms, while excluding progressive viewpoints. The analysis would explore how media discourse maintains power dynamics and legitimizes specific political ideologies. 2. Frame analysis. Frame analysis investigates how political issues are framed in public discourse, focusing on what aspects are emphasized and how these frames reflect underlying ideologies. Example: in discussions about climate change, one frame might emphasize economic growth and job creation through green energy, aligning with progressive ideologies, while another emphasizes the cost of regulation to businesses, reflecting conservative economic ideologies. Frame analysis would explore how these different frames shape public understanding of climate policy. 3. Rhetorical analysis. Rhetorical analysis looks at how political ideologies are communicated through appeals to ethos, credibility, pathos, emotion, and logos, logic. This method examines how language persuades audiences to adopt certain political views. Example: a political leader might use ethos by referencing their track record of public service, pathos by invoking fear of rising crime rates, and logos by outlining a detailed plan for law enforcement. Rhetorical analysis would explore how these strategies work together to align the audience with the leader's political ideology. 4. Narrative analysis. Narrative analysis focuses on how political ideologies are conveyed through stories or narratives, examining how events, characters, and actions are constructed to support ideological perspectives. Example: in nationalist discourse, the narrative might center on restoring the nation to its former glory, with the nation as the hero and external threats as the villains. Narrative analysis would explore how this story promotes nationalist ideologies and mobilizes support for protectionist policies. Examples of political ideology in discourse analysis. Example 1. Political campaigns and populism. In political campaigns, populist leaders often use language like, "We are the voice of the forgotten people," to position themselves as representing ordinary citizens against corrupt elites. Discourse analysis would explore how this language reflects populist ideologies, constructing a binary opposition between the people and the elite, and how it mobilizes support by appealing to anti-establishment sentiments. Example 2. Conservative discourse on taxes. In conservative discourse, phrases like, "tax cuts stimulate economic growth by putting money back into the hands of hardworking Americans," reflect an ideology that prioritizes free market capitalism and limited government intervention. Discourse analysis would investigate how this language frames taxation and government spending in terms of individual responsibility and economic freedom. Example 3. Progressive discourse on social justice. In progressive discourse, phrases like, "We must address systemic racism to build a more just and equitable society," reflect an ideology focused on social justice and structural reform. Discourse analysis would explore how this language frames inequality as a systemic issue that requires collective action, aligning with ideologies of equity and inclusion. Example 4. Nationalist rhetoric in immigration debates. Nationalist politicians might use language like, "We must defend our borders to protect our culture and way of life," to promote immigration restrictions. Discourse analysis would examine how this rhetoric constructs a national identity in opposition to immigrants, reflecting ideologies of nationalism and xenophobia. Example 5. Environmental activism in green ideology. In environmental discourse, activists might say, "The future of our planet depends on the actions we take today," reflecting a green ideology that emphasizes sustainability and intergenerational responsibility. Discourse analysis would explore how this language constructs a moral obligation to protect the environment and challenges ideologies that prioritize short-term economic gain. Challenges in analyzing political ideology through discourse. 1. Hidden ideologies. Political ideologies are not always explicit in discourse. They may be embedded in seemingly neutral language or presented as common sense. Discourse analysts must carefully unpack these implicit ideologies to reveal underlying assumptions and power dynamics. 2. Polarization and extremism. In highly polarized contexts, discourse can become extreme, with little room for nuance or compromise. Discourse analysts must navigate these extreme ideological positions to understand how language reinforces divisions and intensifies conflict. 3. Globalization and transnational ideologies. Political ideologies are not confined to national borders, and discourse analysts must consider how global ideologies, e.g., neoliberalism, environmentalism, interact with local political contexts. This requires attention to how political discourse travels across cultural and national boundaries. Conclusion. Political ideologies are deeply embedded in the language used to discuss governance, policy, and social issues. Through discourse analysis, researchers can explore how ideologies are constructed, maintained, and challenged in political discourse, revealing the underlying values, power dynamics, and assumptions that shape public opinion and behavior. By examining framing, rhetoric, metaphors, and narratives, discourse analysis uncovers how political actors use language to promote their ideologies, legitimize authority, and mobilize support. Understanding the role of political ideology in discourse is crucial for analyzing political communication, social change, and the ongoing negotiation of power in society. Frequently asked questions. What does political ideology mean in the context of discourse analysis? Political ideology refers to the set of beliefs and values that inform political opinions and behaviors. In discourse analysis, it involves examining how language reflects, constructs, and propagates these ideologies in political speeches, media, and policy documents. How do political ideologies shape the framing of issues? Political ideologies influence how issues are framed, guiding which aspects of a topic are highlighted or downplayed. For instance, conservatives might frame healthcare in terms of individual freedom, while progressives might emphasize universal rights. Discourse analysis uncovers these framings and their ideological roots. What rhetorical strategies are used to convey political ideologies? Political actors use rhetorical strategies like ethos, credibility, pathos, emotion, and logos, logic, to align audiences with their ideologies. For example, populist rhetoric might include appeals to the voice of the people and criticism of elites, reflecting anti-establishment ideologies. Why are metaphors important in political discourse? Metaphors simplify complex political concepts and align them with specific ideologies. For example, describing government spending as living within its means supports fiscal conservatism. Discourse analysis reveals how metaphors shape understanding and ideological alignment. How does discourse construct social and political identities? Discourse constructs identities by defining who belongs to certain political or social groups. Terms like patriots or the working class create in-group and out-group distinctions, reinforcing or challenging political identities. Discourse analysis shows how these constructions align with ideological positions. How do political ideologies legitimize power through language? Language is used to justify power structures, promote policies, or challenge the status quo. Phrases like national security measures can legitimize state authority, reflecting ideologies prioritizing order and safety. Discourse analysis uncovers how language maintains or disrupts power dynamics. What is the role of polarization in political discourse? Political discourse often polarizes debates, creating stark divisions between opposing ideologies. Discourse analysis examines how language intensifies these divides and influences public perception, potentially leading to entrenched political conflict. How do moral and ethical dimensions play into political ideologies? Political ideologies often frame policies as morally superior. For example, a progressive might argue, healthcare is a human right, aligning with ideologies valuing social justice. Discourse analysis studies how moral language shapes public attitudes and ethical debates. What are common methods for analyzing political ideology in discourse? Critical discourse analysis, CDA, reveals how power and ideology are embedded in language. Frame analysis examines how issues are emphasized or downplayed in public discourse. Rhetorical analysis looks at persuasive techniques used to align audiences with ideologies. Narrative analysis studies stories in political discourse to understand how ideologies are communicated. What challenges do analysts face when studying political ideologies in discourse? Challenges include uncovering hidden or implicit ideologies, navigating polarized or extreme language, and considering how global ideologies interact with local contexts. Analysts must also decipher how ideologies are embedded in seemingly neutral or factual language.